6 reasons why your team isn't following your SOPs. I get this question a ton. Probably one of the top 5 questions I get as an operations strategist is, Allie, I've made these SOPs, I've centralized them for my team, and nobody's following them. I don't understand what is happening. And so these are the reasons that I go through in sequence with all of our private clients and all of our people who work with us at Operations Agency. I take a look at these 6 things and these 6 things only because the fact of the matter is we want to establish that process culture as soon as humanly possible. But the fact of it is that we can't actually do that before we have actually hit these 6 steps. So the very first reason that I see team not following SOPs is because they don't exist. And it might seem really simple, but sometimes as a founder, we ask our team to make an SOP, centralize a resource, write something down inside of a document. And with best intentions, your team means to do that, but maybe they don't. Maybe it gets pushed to the back of the queue because there's an urgent request from a client or an urgency in something that you're doing. Somebody walks into their office. And sometimes some of those SOPs, some of those resources, some of those things that you think have been written down or that you think you've said 1,000 times, they haven't made their way onto paper. And so making sure that your SOPs actually exist is step number 1, right? We have to actually write them and we have to actually make sure that they are exactly what we want in the exact sequence and make sure that those are in front of our team. So that's the second one. Make sure they are centralized. So I know, probably just like y'all, I've created a bunch of documentation over the years of growing Operations Agency. And sometimes I put that stuff into a folder that makes sense to me for the day, and then we can't find it. And so what we did was we created a system for how we organize information. We do it in 2 ways. First is in our file sharing system. So where do these files need to end up, in what folder, in what subfolder, et cetera, et cetera. And the second is to make sure that it's centralized. We use a spreadsheet. We've recently moved everything into Airtable. So no matter what software you're using or where you plan to keep all of your SOPs, they need to be centralized and they need to be easy to follow so that your team can be in a position to just bookmark that on their Chrome or wherever it is that they're doing their work, and they can easily access the SOPs whenever they want to. And they know that there is a central source of truth, right? We don't want to be digging through the ethers of our Google Drive, because if it takes our team 15, 20 minutes to find an SOP, they're probably going to go ahead and continue doing their work. Otherwise, it's just going to take them off the trajectory entirely, right? So we want them to be able to find them easily. I always say, let's try and be 2 clicks away from anything inside of the business that we might need. First click into the knowledge base, second click is into the actual document or the resource that they need. Third reason that your team is not following your SOPs is that there are multiples. There are multiple copies of the same thing. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when we audit our clients, they have 4 or 5 documents that cover parts of the onboarding process for their new clients or for their customers or how they field their calls. And sometimes with best intentions, our team is making this documentation. They are writing some stuff down, but maybe we have 3 or 4 CSRs and they're actually writing down their information and it's all scattered in 5 or 6 different documents and there's 5 or 6 different versions. And so then when your team goes to take a look in the knowledge base or search that folder inside of your file sharing system, they pull up 4 or 5 different documents covering the same thing with some discrepancies, and then they wonder, well, which one is accurate? And so they don't want to do the wrong thing, right? They want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So then oftentimes what they'll do is it'll create confusion, and so they'll abandon it entirely. The 4th reason why your team is not using your SOPs is because the content might not be updated. So as a small business, we are always changing and we're always growing. We're finding new ways of doing things. And that means that processes change pretty rapidly. I don't know a business that we currently work with who isn't growing at a pace where we need to support them in updating their documentation almost every single week. And it's incredible that folks will either not update their information and then they come to us and they're like, oh my gosh, we have all these SOPs, but they're super outdated because it fell to the back of the queue. And what will happen is, similar to having multiples, your team will pull something up and it'll be super outdated. And so they don't want to do the wrong thing. They don't want to, just trust that this is the way to do it because they know, I think we might have changed this, but I'm not exactly sure. We had a situation a couple of weeks ago where we changed something about our customer onboarding process, and a new teammate opened up the documentation because we hadn't updated it yet, and they sent out the wrong information to a new client. And that was an ouchie. Big ouchie. And I think at the end of the day, right, that person, it may have even eroded their trust in the documentation because they were like, well, I followed the document and the document didn't seem right. So it'll start to tell them that the documentation might not actually be the best place or the best resource for them to be able to get everything that they need to do their job right. So you want to make sure the content is actually updated and that you guys have a process for updating that. So we can go ahead and talk about that in a minute here. But the fifth thing that we check when our team isn't following their SOPs is that we have a champion. We need to have somebody who is dedicated to actually following up, making sure that processes are updated, that they're centralized, that they're talking with key collaborators in each of the teams to make sure that documentation is actually updated. Because if we don't have a champion, if we don't have somebody who's asking some of those critical questions, documents are going to get stale faster than we can say Indiana Jones. It's going to happen so fast. And also, something to note about our champion is that they don't have to be a subject matter expert in every single area of the business. They don't have to know every single nitty-gritty detail that needs to go into SOPs. But what they do need to ask is, hey, when was the last time you updated this? Can we just grab 15 minutes for you and me to go through how this current change is actually going to affect the process over here? And they become the forcing function at your business to make sure that every single thing is totally updated for your team to be able to access and actually use. Sixth and final thing, and this comes down to you, your leadership team, and the folks who are actually reinforcing the importance of this document, is making sure that you set the standard. The standard is that we provide up-to-date documentation with our champion, making sure to dedicate time and resources to getting you the information that you need to do your job well. And we actually expect that you will open this up, that you will make sure to review it, that you will use it for quality control, and really start to ground some key performance indicators in exactly what your SOPs are supposed to create inside of your business. I have a totally separate training on making sure that you have the right key performance indicators inside of your business, but here in documentation, what we want to do is we want to be able to confidently tell our team, if you're doing this in this way, it produces this result, right? We want to know, what are our definitions of done? What types of metrics should we be seeing? If we know that we've followed this process correctly, and review that, review it with your team. If you have a weekly scorecard meeting or a weekly stand-up on some of your key performance indicators, which is highly recommended, by the way, make sure that you're reviewing the information, because if you aren't, what will happen is your team will start to get the signal that this has fallen off of leadership's radar. And you do not want your team thinking that standardization, repeatability, and your key performance indicators have fallen off your radar. You want them to understand we've updated the documentation. We know that this is going to help you get these types of results, and we're going to check on these types of results every single week. So if you are in a position where you are really wanting to make sure that your documentation is updated, centralized, actually effective, and really producing the right outcomes inside of your business, these 6 steps are really critical to follow. If you want some support with this, go ahead over to operationsagency.com/apply. We can see if it's a fit to partner together on making all of this true inside of your business. We work with hundreds of companies every single year to really get their documentation down, centralized, and useful for their team so that they can scale their companies comfortably and their team knows exactly what to do. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.